big scandals usually start the same way with just a little bit of evidence here, some stories here, some of it doesn't all add up, but you start putting it all together and you have something that's called circumstantial evidence that starts to prove up what one side is saying is happening, and it starts telling the real story. And that is starting to happen with the Trump Epstein story here. It's reached a tipping point. We know the emails are out, and we know that Popok covered it already on Legal AF. We talked about what's out there, and we're going to dive into it, and we're going to bring sort of the lawyer's angle here about all the circumstantial evidence that's out there. We're going to talk about different kinds of evidence: direct evidence, circumstantial evidence, inferences that you can make from evidence, and sort of a trial lawyer's take on how you'd prove something like this up in court. And it's starting to look like there's plenty out there. And this is becoming a real problem with Trump. So we're going to dive into that today. I'm Sean Kernick, and that's Brian Kabatek over there. We're a couple of trial lawyers at Kabatek LLP, handling cases all over the country, based out of California. This is another installment of Civil Action on the Legal AF Network. Before we dive into this subject, remember, hit that subscribe button if you like the Legal AF Network, if you appreciate all the contributors and the good folks we have here bringing you this news and giving you this analysis. Brian, where do you think we start today with this issue?
Let's start by just giving a very brief explanation about evidence and how evidence comes in. And this is something that lawyers learn when they're very young, if they're trying cases. Maybe you learn it in law school. So there's a difference between direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. And the best way to explain it is that if you're in a room and someone comes in from outside and they're wet, and they're carrying an umbrella and the umbrella is wet, that's circumstantial evidence that it's raining outside. If
Yeah.
you're standing outside and you're looking at the rain, that's direct evidence. Now, the reason that's important is both kinds of evidence are admissible in court, and all kinds of ways that this kind of evidence comes in. So what Shant and I want to do today is piece together combination of direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. Now, remember, the backdrop to this, Shant, is Donald Trump has, over the time that we've been covering this and before, distanced himself. It seems like every month goes by, he gets less and less knowledgeable about who Jeffrey Epstein was. Jeffrey
Or
Epstein,
who
that
Ghislaine
creep.
Maxwell was too, or
Yeah.
who Ghislaine Maxwell is. Who? And there was even a part where he was asked about possibly pardoning her, and he goes, "Who? I'll have to look at that. I don't know who that is, or I haven't heard that name in a long time." Yeah, so it's really
So
great. But yeah,
we
as
want to
Brian
take
said,
all of this and kind of put it out there as if we were talking to a jury. And if you were presenting those to a jury. Now, let's just note up front that a lot of this is verified. Some of it is circumstantial in the sense that it's been told, it's been mentioned, but we don't have direct evidence of it. Some of it is hearsay. Some of it's admissible hearsay, well beyond what we're going to talk about here. But some of it would come into court. Most of this, I think, would come into court. Don't you, Sean?
I think so. I think so. If you had someone to be able to say, like, I remember them being there. I took this photograph, things like that. Some of these stories would also come in. And this isn't just stuff we're kind of babbling about. In California, at least, there's specific jury instructions that explain to a jury, once the evidence is all put on, and even before it's put on, a judge reads this to a jury that explains the difference between direct and indirect or circumstantial evidence. And, they even give examples about seeing a plane flying in the sky versus hearing it and then seeing the trail. If you saw it, that's direct evidence. If you heard it and saw the trail afterwards, but you don't see the plane, you can infer that there's indirect evidence. So both of these are
Just
admissible. Both of these are enough
right.
to prove a case.
Just like my
So I don't know,
rain
where do we
analogy,
start?
right?
What's
Well,
that?
I think we have to look at this. I said just like my rain analogy, but let's look at this
Yeah.
first of all. That there's several categories here. There's just information that these two guys were friends. Like for example, we know that they knew each other from sometime in the late 1980s into the 1990s through the New York social scene. They both were in. Well, he was in finance, but Epstein was, but that's a whole other issue we have to like talk about here. We had another
Yeah.
episode on the suspicious activity reports that Morgan Stanley had to file, the money, where the money came from. Those are all open questions that we're not even talking about today. But we
Yeah.
know that they were close. The other thing, though, Sean, is that there is evidence not just that they were friends, but there's evidence of the womanizing or childizing. I don't know what you want to call it, but the propensity
Yeah.
that these two guys have for women. I mean, it's not beyond the discussion here that Donald Trump also has a history of relationships, cheating on his wives, having an affair with a porn star and other people while he's
Allegedly.
married. Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
okay. And
well, I'm
and
kidding. No, yeah, some of it's not allegedly. Some of it is
no, I mean
conceded.
because it's been proven in court, right? So we know
Well,
about this
so
stuff.
in that sort of era, in that realm, I wanted to point out, direct evidence over there, I think is, photos and videos of them together at parties, literally partying together with women and,
So let's use a
clearly,
few of those. Let's go to a few of those examples. Shall we, Sean? So, for example, there's an October 1992 Victoria's Secret party with 28 women and few men, where Epstein appears relaxed and Trump introduces the models. Okay,
yeah,
that's something that happened. Trump's wedding with Marla Maples, that Epstein was there. It happened at the Plaza Hotel, and
which I
there's
think Trump
pictures of
might
it.
have even owned at the time, right? Yeah.
Well, him and the bank, undoubtedly, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's pictures in October of 1993 with them at the Harley Davidson Cafe opening when Ivanka,
Right.
his daughter, was 12, for example, right? And then you get to Mar-a-Lago in the 90s, and at this point, he is with Melania, who's not his wife at that time. And then we have the birthday in 1997. That's different. That's the birthday note. Jeffrey, happy birthday. You're a great guy. Best wishes from Donald. Right. So
Yep.
there's all this evidence. Right. Then we go to the 2000s, and I think this is a very telling time. Right.
Yeah, there's photos from the 2000s, Mar-a-Lago. I think one of them's kind of famous with like Melania and Ghislaine Maxwell. That's from a 2000s era photo. There's, I think, in 2002, Trump gave a New York Times or New York Magazine, I'm sorry, interview where he says something along the lines of, "I've known Jeffrey for many years. He's a terrific guy. He likes beautiful women. Maybe some of them are on the younger side." Which is a little too on the nose, right, to make a comment like that now that we know what we know. It's kind of creepy now that you think about it. Back then, maybe people read it and go, that's kind of funny, even though it kind of sounds creepy anyway. But now it's like, okay, that sounds very bad. So that's in the 2000s. Epstein also, there's some evidence that Epstein has mentioned him in the 2000s, meaning Trump, saying that he's one of his close friends, that they've worked together, etc. Then they start having a little bit of a falling out, right? Because I think in
Well,
2004, and actually,
before you get to the falling out, let's not forget the 2003 birthday card that Trump, has filed lawsuits over, but it certainly seems
that's right,
authentic. There's certainly
that's right,
evidence that it's authentic. And if I were putting this in front of the jury, I'd say the jury, you make your own conclusions, you draw your own conclusions. There are handwriting experts here. And that's the one with the drawing of the woman. Best wishes for a happy birthday and a very special year ahead. And then we get shot into well, I want to go back in time to the flights because we know that there are flight logs dating into the 90s where Trump flew on Epstein's plane and shot. Let's share with people the name of Epstein's plane.
well, I don't know if it's an official name, but it was nicknamed the Lolita Express, which that does not sound good. You do not want to be the guy with an airplane that's known as the Lolita Express, right?
Because
It's a because it's a reference to an old novel where the protagonist or whatever we're going to call him is having an affair with I think a 12-year-old girl. So
yeah, and he's like in his 30s at the time.
right, despicable stuff. Yeah. So yeah, there's the flight logs, and we know that this was used to go to Epstein's island.
But
And
Sean, I want to be clear about this. There's no evidence that Trump ever went to the island. There's seven
that's right.
flights, but they were
That's right.
there's no evidence that Trump ever went to the island. Again, there's no direct evidence. You can draw inferences from that as a juror, but there's no direct evidence of that, right? And
Right.
Trump's,
And I'm not even sure if we have the actual documents that we've seen the flight logs that list him. I think it comes from secondary sources. So I don't know if that gets in. Then there's a whole hearsay analysis that has to get done. And this isn't evidence class in law school, so we won't dive into that. But maybe, if the records exist, certainly Trump can say that they're fake or whatever the hell he'll probably say. But yeah, 7 trips on the Lolita Express, Jeffrey Epstein's private plane. I think mostly during the period of 93 to 97. So that's back in the 90s again. So there's that.
now
Um, put that in
Now
the bucket of indirect evidence.
let's talk about Michael Wolff. This is a guy who has over 100 hours of taped interviews with Epstein. This plays into the emails that have now been released. There's all kinds of information on these tapes. Some might come in, some might not, about Epstein talking about that Trump first had sex with Melania on his plane, that Epstein claimed that Trump liked. Um, effing friends' wives and was his closest friend. So there was a lot of this kind of, evidence on these tapes about their relationship. There's other witnesses who are out there who said that they were best friends, they had a close relationship. There's somebody who's come forward, whether you believe her or not, that said that Trump groped her in 1993 at the Trump Tower when Epstein was there after an Epstein introduction. So there's all that evidence. I just putting that evidence out there. That's what a jury would hear, right?
Yeah, that's a decent amount. I'm not saying that any single one of these just totally, you know, totally takes the day, carries the day, but there's plenty out there. Indirect evidence galore, circumstantial evidence, plenty of it. But I also think that to some degree, these most recent emails, the ones that came out November 12th, some of it is direct evidence. Epstein saying that Trump knew what was happening, or Trump was around, or whatever the actual emails say. I mean, I don't know how Trump would dance around those. But what I think is also another good piece of really damning circumstantial, maybe even direct evidence, though, is the fact that Trump has fought so hard to not release these. Trump has fought so hard to deny or not acknowledge the ties with Epstein. That is really damning, in my opinion.
I think what's also damning, in my opinion, Sean, in addition to what you just said, is the moving target for why their relationship ended. So Trump tries to paint it as you stole a 16-year-old spa employee from Mar-a-Lago. Now, first of all, let's just pause. Little footnote here for everybody. Why do you have a 16-year-old working in your spa at your resort
Right.
hotel or private club or whatever it is? Okay. And that's
Yeah.
Virginia Guffrey, right? The woman who's sort of known as victim one, the woman who committed suicide earlier this year. Very
Yeah.
tragic story. She's been the most vocal person. But that happened like in 2001, 2002. And we know he wasn't banned until much later, 2004, 2005. And the other evidence that comes out about why he was actually banned, and we've covered this before, Sean, is I'll let you reveal this, do the reveal.
Why? I'm not following what the
Yeah.
insinuation
Is
is here.
that sorry? Is that the real reason it seems that he was banned, that Epstein was banned from Mar-a-Lago, is because Trump and Epstein got into a dispute over
Oh,
money,
yes,
right?
where I left off a little bit talking about their Palm Beach dealings, the interactions they had in Florida. They were fighting over trying to buy a mansion or something like that. They had some dispute rising out of that. That's the real reason. That's right. That's right.
Right,
Um,
and that it was a dispute. They wanted to buy. They both wanted to buy the same piece of property. Trump ultimately got it, and that was like the end of their relationship. 2002, 2004,
Yeah,
2005, somewhere in
it's
that range.
not because
So
Trump was standing up for the rights of some young woman that was wronged or taken advantage of or something like
the
that. In fact,
16-year-old he had working, the
yeah,
16-year-old he had working in his spot, right? He wasn't standing up for her, and that's more evidence that you put on it. A jury would hear. So you've got all of this, and then you come forward to kind of these emails that came out today, right? That the Democrats released today.
yeah, these are sort of like the bombshell. These are the ones that I think have been covered. If you're watching this and haven't heard about these, I'll quickly go over them. But we're not the ones breaking this news or anything. But there was an email between Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell where he specifically says, and this is April of 2011, where he says, "I want you to realize that dog that hasn't barked is Trump." And then there's a redacted phrase, the name of a victim. Victim spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. That's pretty, Epstein's not around to cross-examine him, but I mean, it's starting to all line up. All of these things are starting to line up. Like I said, circumstantial evidence, at least, maybe even direct evidence of Epstein himself saying that this victim has spent hours at my house with him being Trump. I mean, that's what the email says. This isn't us reading into it. It's just the language of the email. There's a few other ones too. You have Michael Wolff communicating with Epstein, talking about how do I, Epstein saying, how do we best position this? Because, Trump and my relationship is going to come up. And that was in the lead up to the 2016 election. And Michael Wolff says, there's an opportunity for you to talk about this. How are you going to deal with this? And there's some discussion. So clearly there's some relationship there. And clearly Jeffrey Epstein was in a position to have some sort of political leverage over Trump. And this is something that Trump has not just denied, but like actively hidden for a long time until now. I don't know what he's going to do next here.
Well, and I think this is, sort of in summation, you've got all the evidence out there. So, and you were saying this earlier, and then you have the fact that Trump has made such vehement denials. The old quote, "Me think thou protest too much." At some
Yeah.
point, why are there's these vehement denials? I hardly knew the guy. Who is this? I'm going to sue you because you're producing this card that I never signed, despite the fact that it looks exactly like my signature. What relationship? I got this guy
Yeah.
out of here because of he was going after underage girls in my spa and hiring my employees away, and that's all this stuff starts coming out. You have to start looking at this and going, well, first of all, does anyone really believe you didn't have a relationship with him? Right?
Yeah.
That's the first thing.
By the way, one of the other emails, it specifically says it's in reference to Mar-a-Lago. It's Epstein talking with Michael Wolff, the author that interviewed him, saying Trump said he asked me to resign. Never a member ever of Mar-a-Lago. So, that kind of debunks, at least it's a piece of evidence that folks can consider in debunking Trump's bullshit explanation about I kicked him out because he took advantage of someone or whatever. He's trying to
And
poach
something
someone.
we always ask juries to consider, and something that we always make an issue of, is the timing. So a lot of these emails and these communications were well before this whole thing came out, right? This is
Yeah.
before the arrest. This is before obviously before Epstein's suicide. It's a lot of this evidence is just there, and so you have to start thinking about timing wise. I mean, if Epstein were still alive today and made statements like this, they could be suspect. I mean, look at Ghislaine Maxwell, right? Here she is. She makes statements to Trump's own personal lawyer, who just now happens to be the number two person in the Justice Department. And she says things like, "No, Trump was a great guy, awesome guy." Well, yeah, because he also the guy who holds the keys to the cell. So, of course, the timing on that. But statements she made before the arrests,
Yeah.
before all of the shit hit the fan, is incredibly relevant. You've got to give it more weight. And that's what we ask juries to do.
That's true. There's less sort of motivation to lie or kind of exaggerate things or try to curry favor with folks. This is
Correct.
before all this shit hit the fan for Epstein. So, yeah, I think that's important to recognize. One of the other things that kind of stuck out for me is this quote where there's a discussion about Michael Cohen, who was Trump's former fixer, who kind of came clean. He pled guilty and he came clean now. And now he kind of talks about all this shit that Trump had him do. But Epstein writes to someone, he says, "You see, I know how dirty Donald is. My guess is that non-lawyers, New York business people have no idea what it means to have your fixer flip," in discussing Michael Cohen. So, again, circumstantial evidence. There isn't something directly, but it's, he's saying, "I know how dirty Donald is." And look, that could be a reference to business dealings. But again, the implication is there, the insinuation is there, the circumstantial evidence of something more than that seems to be there. So, I'm curious how this
And
is all going to shake out.
I think it's right. Stay tuned, right? I mean, this has been great. We're going to keep covering this. We're going to keep covering these issues. But as far as I'm concerned, I hope that this I didn't give, neither Sean nor I really gave what would be a closing argument in the case. Maybe we'll do that at some point. That might be fun. But right now, stay tuned because, like we say, good cases get better, bad cases get worse. And if you were prosecuting or civilly going after Donald Trump, you'd have to say that this is a case that keeps getting better. And if you were Donald Trump, you'd have to say this is a case that keeps getting worse. So that's my last thought on it, Chuck.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end it on. This is just going to keep getting worse for him. And stay tuned. Let's see what happens here. We'll try to pick apart all the different legal angles of it. So Let's see what happens. I'm Sean Kernigan. That's Brian Kabatek over there. This has been another installment of Civil Action on the Legal AF Network. Again, if you like this stuff, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share this with whoever you think might find it informative. We really like doing this sort of legal analysis, and hopefully you find it interesting. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.